And we are live with Galileo Podcast number 12. We're doing back-to-back episodes today. I'm still here with my same guest. We've got Brian, writer of Also Mott. We've got Lark, who's back with us again. She plays Bernice Geist. We've got Matthew Elijah Williams the fourth. And we have the other Brian, who plays, I don't know, who do you play? Some doctor with a bone saw fetish, something like that, I heard.
Yeah, that's about it.
One of the Vutilanans.
Tula, yeah.
Yeah, no, Brian plays our prestigious Doctor Tula Vutilanen, and we're here to talk to you guys about something that I think has been in a lot of Obsidian Fleet Simmers minds in the past month or so. Most recently, there was a bit of discontent within the organization. A few ill feelings towards each other from different members, and it's something that I guess the best way for me to describe it is that it's a type of political drama within our organization, within the Obsidian Fleet, that I still to this day haven't really understood completely, but the roots of it seem to be kind of based on the way that Obsidian Fleet is run, certain policies, certain structures, certain rules that we have in place within Obsidian Fleet, which certain people who were members of our fleet here in Obsidian became disgruntled with. And, for some reason or another, they didn't necessarily agree with these certain policies, these rules, these guidelines that our organization had put forward, and they eventually decided to go elsewhere. And it's one of those things where I wish everybody the best. Everybody who's left to go on to new pastures, to find a new organization. I wish them all the very best. I hope those people in their sims and all their crew can have a great time simming and doing Trek fan fiction, which is what we're ultimately all here about. But at the same time, I also, I don't know. I mean, it just leaves a lot of questions. A lot of unanswered questions in its wake. I'm not sure if there's really any way to move forward in a positive manner and to kind of progress if some of those unanswered questions aren't answered, if that makes any sense. So kind of in layman's terms, without knowing what the problem is and why these people left, you can't really necessarily fix the problem. So I don't know. I mean, it's something that's been on my mind for a while. I've written, I don't know, maybe 10 emails to different people about this over the past month or so, and I've talked to a few people out of character, both here on the sim, outside of the sim, to some of the Obsidian Fleet's Admiralty, and I've gotten a huge range of different perspectives on everything, but I thought it would be great to do an actual sit-down where we can all chat with all of us, no emails on that stuff, just a proper voice chat, kind of express our own opinions about what we feel Obsidian Fleet is, what we think the pros of Obsidian Fleet are, and what the cons of Obsidian Fleet are. And from there, maybe we could try and figure out what these aspects were of our fleet and of our organization, which certain people didn't like. And I'm happy to have all you guys here with us. I know a couple of you guys, Brian and Matthew, you guys have never been commanding officers here in the fleet, but you're still players, and you guys are great players, so you have just as much of a vested interest in Obsidian Fleet as the rest of us do. And I know the other Brian and and Lark, you guys have both been COs in the past, been TGCOs as well, so you guys have that experience in kind of the fleet operations aspect of Obsidian Fleet. So, I mean, I really don't know how to start with this. I mean, where do we begin? Let's just talk about, I guess let's just talk about kind of what our experiences have been as players here on Galileo in Obsidian Fleet. Brian, let's start out with you.
Actually, the first sim I played on in Obsidian Fleet left while I was on it, so we voted to go independent. So that was kind of an interesting perspective, and it seemed to me as a player, I just kind of, and still to this day, feel removed from the fleet and kind of its operation. I just write on the ship, so I have no idea what goes on at the fleet level, and I feel like that's one of the biggest problems with the fleet is feeling kind of massively disconnected from the identity of the fleet. So I don't know what's going on the other ships. I don't know how anything is run. I don't know what a task force group commander does or anything like that. So I've always felt like we needed a newsletter or something to kind of draw people together a little bit. Maybe little snippets about what the other ships are doing, and it's possible that exists somewhere and I just don't know about it. But I think the pros are certainly in just having a player base that's accessible. If you're independent and you're on your own, that the sim that I was on that left and went independent and died, I would say a couple of months later. We just didn't have access to people, coming on and wanting to join the ship because we were off in the middle of nowhere doing our own thing and not part of a bigger group. So that's my perspective. I'm just sort of, I feel like on the outside, and that's fine with me.
Lark, what do you think?
Well, I apologize. That's Ginger. How about you pass for a moment?
Okay. Matthew, you're up.
Okay. Well, I guess I kind of feel like Brian in the regard that I feel kind of disconnected from it as well. I kind of bounced around OF for a long time, and I started in OF, probably like 10 or 11 years ago even, and of course the Sims that I was on aren't around anymore, but it seemed different back then. It seemed more of a cohesive group. Everyone kind of knew what was going on, and the COs kept you informed, and then it just, I don't know, it kind of changed. I left and came back, but I feel like on the Galileo, I think, Jay, you kind of keep the politics of OF out of the sim, which I greatly appreciate because I'm only here to write. I don't really care what happens, on the levels above us. What you guys do with the groups and all that. I mean, as long as it's not something drastic like, we're blowing up the ship because we don't like you anymore. But I'm okay with not having all of that extra stuff involved in the sim. And I've been on OF Sims where the COs have brought in the drama from the higher-ups, or they were disgruntled with Triad, and they took it out on us, or like Brian said, your sim went independent, and I've had that happen, and people, the sim just dies because there's no resources available, but it's because the CO was pissed because of some rule or some kind of change, and the only other thing I'd have to say is I think sometimes the players should have more of a voice on what goes on in the fleets. I know we can relay that to our COs, but how do we know the COs are relaying our thoughts and concerns? That's the big thing too is, on Galileo we have a really good command team who listens to us and addresses our issues. But I've been on other sims where the COs don't really listen. So I wish there was more of a communication where the players could say, well, this is what we think, because we're not wrapped up in anything that's above us. So I think we could offer a unique perspective as players to a large community like OF. So, so yeah, that's just my thoughts on it. So,
That's excellent, excellent. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Lark, are you back? Do you want to have?
Yeah.
Do you want to add anything in?
sorry about that, Lark. I talked too much.
No, that's fine. My dog was excited because company came into the door. She's, a little yippy thing sometimes, so I apologize. I started this fleet as a player, and I had issues finding the right ship for my right kind of character, and so I decided to become a CO. And that was good. That was awesome, and I enjoyed it. And then my task force CO was like, you're really good at this advertisement stuff. You've really got a flair for what you're doing with your command. Why don't you become, the OPM, since that position is open? And that was basically my entry level into that. And in hindsight, I really wish I had turned her down on that, because my opinions of what the Obsidian Fleet brass are, 5 years ago, it's pretty jaded, I'll admit it. But in my opinion now, I can say the more you get involved with the fleet political crap, the more it's going to drain you. And I kind of think the way these fleets have become, it's not just Obsidian. I mean, they look at the stupid little graphic on their name, and they had the 5 pips, and they get these big egos, and I kind of have a feeling that they just really, it gets to a point where they care more about keeping their title than they do about listening to people. So for me, I did go independent. Did it work for me? Not always. So you hit rough patches, but I can't really say what's better. Independent, fleet, they each have their own advantages. I mean, with the fleet, you have resources. You have people working constantly on research and development with specs, because not every CO knows about the freaking deck layouts and all that crap. So you have an R&D department that helps you out with that. You also have a huge recruitment thing where all you have to do is go on the forums and just be like, hey, I got this opening, blah, blah, blah. And, I won't knock fleets, because in the general gist of it, it makes it easier for a new CO to get their crew. But when you go independent, you really want to have your own little community, which I've been on some sims in Obsidian Fleet. I haven't really run across them, except Galileo is one of the few, where they actually have their own little community. Could they survive? Probably. Long? I don't know. I'm fine either or. But in my opinion, I just think the higher up you go in the ladder of any fleet, it can burn you out, because you're having to listen to all this petty bull crap, and it's taking away your time and eating up your creativity that you could have spent on a post.
So it's fleet politics, correct, Clark?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a great point. Brian, the other Brian.
Yeah.
You
well,
last.
I think there were a
You
couple
eat
of good
last.
points. A couple of good points which were raised already. First, I think Lark was she was onto something with the whole, people with too many little pictures of little rank insignias. I think people people tend to be great most of the time, but there's the saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I'm not quite sure that that's accurate. In my opinion, it's actually small amounts of power that go to people's heads and corrupt them. And there is no, it's why, like, an assistant manager at McDonald's is going to be a dick to everyone under his command, right? And that's the same reason why, because being an admiral in a fleet of imaginary starships is literally the smallest amount of power possible. So I think there can be issues with people, and also, I mean, it's probably hard on them too. I mean, I'd imagine Triad probably gets tons of emails, and I know from being in a leadership role in a few organizations that there are some points where you're like, oh God, I am sick of dealing with all these members coming to me with all their problems. Just shut up, everyone. But I think another good point was talking about ships that went independent and about how there's kind of a bottleneck in communication between like the fleet, and then it goes through this narrow bottleneck that is just the CO and then down to the players. That I think that's why you've had like some ships leave, because the CO would get pissed off and the players don't have anywhere to hear any countering opinions. They don't hear both sides of the story, and they go along with whatever their CO says pretty much. I remember I had that experience 8 years ago or whatever, when I was first in Obsidian Fleet, before I left and came back. And I think that's a tricky thing, because as a CO, sometimes there's stuff that I don't think is that important or that I wouldn't particularly want to forward on to my players. Like, I'm writing like a note to my players and just like, hey, FYI, a bunch of people in this other task group just rage quit a couple weeks ago. Just thought you should know. That's kind of a downer, So it's not something that's it's not something that I, as a CEO, I'm going to just, throw out there and tell all my players about just because it happened. I like to try to keep people motivated and keep things positive, so I'm not going to go tell every individual player about every bad thing that's happened in the fleet. And when it comes to the fleet itself, I mean, to me, it's kind of a trade-off. You have a lot of resources, and you have a lot of access to a player base. Being a part of the fleet definitely does raise the profile of your sim, though I will add that there are people out there who are reluctant to join sims that are parts of fleets because they've had bad experiences, and some of them, I don't blame them. But the other thing is, being part of a fleet, there are more rules that you have to follow, and I think some structure is probably good because it enables you to pool your resources and have those resources, which are great for COs and great for new players. But when we get into some of them, I think it becomes a little excessive and can become stifling, and which causes anger.
Yeah, I think this is a great segue into the heart of this segment. And I thank you for that, Brian and Lark and Matthew, because you guys put in some great insight, and each of you guys have very valid opinions, and nothing that any of you guys said was wrong. It was all completely valid, and you guys are the voice of the simmers. You guys are the voice of our fleet here, and you guys are, more importantly, the voice of Galileo. And I kind of hope that what I've done here with Galileo has, to some extent, tried to keep us insulated from some of the negative things that might go on within Obsidian Fleet. I think, Brian, I know you touched on it a little bit. You said that you didn't really feel like you were part of a bigger fleet. When you were here on Galileo, you felt like more so you were just a part of our community here on Galileo. And that's something that I'm open to change that if people want if people want me to kind of relay more messages from Obsidian Fleet and to kind of bring us more into a fleet community, then I'm happy to do that. For me personally, my goal has always been to have us be a sim, and just be a sim where we're a close group of writers and we can write fun stories with each other, and then to block everything else out, because everything else is kind of a distraction, in my opinion, if that makes any sense. If we're and I could be completely wrong with that. I could be a little bit off base.
Coming from somebody who's lived in that environment where you're always listening to petty stuff. As a player on Galileo, I don't view myself as a player, a part of the fleet. I'm part of Galileo's community. I'm happy living in oblivious mode of not knowing what's going on, because that makes me as a player happier, and it doesn't harp on my mood when I write, and it's more stress-free for me. But that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate that. I mean, Matthew, Brian, what do you guys think? Do you guys have a preference? I mean, are you guys on board with Lark, or because I've always felt kind of the way that Lark has felt. But I know we have so many different people on our sim and people with different opinions, and I'm obviously I want everybody to express what they think, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, well, I'm a TGCO now anyway, so I'm knee-deep in it either way.
Yeah, you are, man. I mean, you just stepped into quicksand and you don't know how to get your fucking ass out of it, dude. So
I don't know. I'm just there to write. I mean, when you work all day and with being a teacher, you're there 10, 11 hours a day. And when I come, I have to deal with real life politics. So, so I'm glad to be home and writing and not have to worry about, the outside influences of a fleet. So, I'm okay with our writing community the way it is. But on the flip side of that, I think some of the major things that happen in OF that can affect us, I mean, those. I think players should be told about that because, as you said, we are the voice of not just the Galileo, but without the players, there'd be no OF. And so, those higher up brass people, they got to realize that, first of all, it's a game. It's not meant to be, real. So, but if there's major changes, I think it definitely is up to the CO to be responsible enough to tell us, what might be happening or whatnot. I mean, that petty crap happens in every sim. I've been on multiple sims, multiple fleets, and there's always pettiness because you have a bunch of people coming together who have different opinions. But I think generally, and the other Brian said this, we come together to write and all that, I'm okay with just our own little community, of writers, and I just ignore the petty stuff, because you see it on the sim. It's not just a thing that happens with COs, the players see it as well. So, plus, I teach 7 and 8-year-olds. Everything's petty to them, so,
absolutely.
So I'm used to it.
Brian, what do you think about this, man?
I kind of like the idea.
Because you, sorry to interrupt. You seem like a pretty drama-free, kind of like a cool, laid-back dude with the deep voice. Just it seems like you just want to have a po' boy and relax, and then write your tags and all that.
Well, that is my ideal evening. No,
so,
I don't.
Man, what do you think about
I don't like that stuff, and I don't. I think I actively avoid any situation where I'm going to get caught up in it. So I do like feeling a little bit like we're living in a bubble here on Galileo, where we have our own thing going on. So it's a community to the level where we don't have to worry about the rest of the fleet. But at the same time, I kind of just wonder what's going on out of my own curiosity, because I know there are all these other ships where people are writing all these other stories, and I don't necessarily want to take out a 12-hour block and go read through every single post that they've made, but I kind of wonder what stories are they telling? What are they doing on their ship, kind of a thing. So that's where I kind of wonder about a greater integration into the rest of the fleet. But in terms of how it affects us, I would hate for anything to change that was going to see greater oversight or greater involvement of the fleet administration in what we're doing. Oh no, Jade totally checked out while I was talking.
But but I wonder too, like, Galileo is so much bigger than most Sims. I mean, even Sims in the other fleets that I've seen. So I'm wondering if part of our community, which seems to be pretty strong, I wonder if that has something to do with it too. Like the size of our Sim and the community we have, we've just kind of formed our own little bubble. We're not just talking about a Sim that has 7 players on it.
Right. I think that does change it quite a bit because,
right.
At least for me, with that number of people, that quantity, you're not going to connect with everyone. So if you're on a ship with 7 people, maybe you're going to connect with 1 or 2. But if you're on a ship with 35 people, you're going to connect with a lot more people. And so it's going to have, I think, that innate sense of community that goes along with it, with having a connection to more people.
Right. Right.
All right, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Thank God, I don't know how much longer I could have talked.
Well, I had doubt. I did ask a question.
I mean, you play a Brilliant, man. I thought that was your specialty.
You'd think.
Only in writing, right?
Yeah, well, if we'd have changed to like a subject that we know about, like food or bone saws or something.
All right. So, okay. Let's not get too ambitious. All right. So, we've kind of just talked a little bit about what it kind of means to be a player on Galileo, and kind of the difference between that and dealing with the fleet, or I guess, between dealing with Galileo and Obsidian Fleet as a whole. And I think we've all kind of agreed there's a little bit of a disconnect between what goes on within our sim, where we have our nice little utopia, or hopefully it's some sort of utopia, or just complete anarchy, or whatever it is, versus what is going on outside of Galileo. I think for what we do, for all intents and purposes, on Galileo is rewrite stories aboard Galileo, and our community is aboard Galileo, and our friends and the people who we write with and log on with every day are our players and our friends on Galileo. And I think for me, it's always been important to kind of reinforce that tight community, and it's kind of weird, whenever we get a new player on, I'll welcome them to our Yahoo list or send emails to the website, and I'll introduce them as being the newest member to like our little family. And some people be like, "Oh, like we're not a little family," but actually we really are. When we only have 30 people or 25 people, or even when you look within a department, some of our departments only have 5 to 10 people. We're a really little family, and we're a really close-knit group of writers, and that's something that I found creates great stories, great connectivity, builds great relationships out of character between all of us, and it just keeps us as a healthy game. I don't know. Does that make any sense? Like we're the healthiest game that I think I've ever seen. We don't come across a lot of drama. When we do, it just gets dismissed, gets pushed away, gets squashed. I call it squashing. I know some people might not like that idea of squashing drama, but it just gets kind of, there's really no place for drama on any sim to begin with. So I'm one of those guys who's of the type of mind where you just squash it, get rid of it, and move forward. And so we try to keep a close, tight-knit, and positive community going. And I don't really think you can go to any other sim in our fleet and find that. That's not to say anything bad about any of the other games out there, but I just think we have something that's kind of really special going on. And I think we all really get along. We all have a great time writing with each other, chatting with each other, whether it's on the website text or just here on just something like this, like a podcast on Google Hangouts. And that's definitely something that nobody should take for granted. That's something that we've all worked hard for. It's something that is the result of all of you guys, and I think it's really special. I think it's awesome, and it's I feel sadly kind of like the rest of Obsidian Fleet is lacking that element. And I would want to transition to the next segment of, I guess, the next and the final segment of this podcast, which is to kind of address what's recently been going on in Obsidian Fleet. And for you guys who aren't aware, we recently lost, I think, about 10 simulations.
Oh, wow.
8 to 10 simulations who left Obsidian Fleet and went to Theta Fleet.
Ew.
And these people all came from one task force, Task Force 47. And they all made the decision that they didn't, for some reason or another, they didn't like what was happening in Obsidian Fleet, and it upset them enough that they, all of them collectively, wanted to leave and go somewhere else. And when asked for the specifics of why these people left, why these COs decided to leave, specific, like a specific reason. It's like, what was it that you want to do with your sim that Obsidian Fleet wouldn't let you do? None of that was ever answered. So there was never an answer to that question. And instead, we just had a bunch of sims leave. So I think, it's not a mass exodus. It's not something that's going to greatly hurt Obsidian Fleet because we're a large fleet. That was maybe at best maybe a quarter of the fleet. So yeah, it's definitely a substantial portion of Obsidian Fleet, but it's nothing that'll kind of destroy the fleet or keep us from moving forward and from being successful. But at the same time, at least for me, I'd been around as a commanding officer here for, 2.5 years, as a player for another 1.5 years, and I'd never really seen anything like it during my time. And it just seemed so trivial to me, and it seemed like a decision that was made without any explanation and with a bunch of excuses put up instead of proper explanation. And that goes back to the whole idea of politics, fleet politics that we were all talking about earlier. And as we all know, politics are ugly. That's ugly business. Politics is about as dirty as it gets in life. You'll see every type of kind of foul motivation, messed up personality that you could think of if you really want to get into the whole political aspect of how things work. And it's something that Obsidian Fleet has recently suffered, and we're in the rebuilding process. This is one of the reasons that I got promoted. I moved up to TF21, and it's my job now to rebuild our task force. We've been assigned to Task Force 21, go green or go home, pretty much. So I've got a lot on my shoulders to kind of rebuild us and to help us kind of do the same thing I was doing in the capacity before as a TGCO, but do it on a wider scale as a TFCO. So instead of just being in charge of the 7 sims inside of my task group, now I'm in charge of the the 21 or I guess 19 sims now in Task Force 21. So I'm going to be doing the same thing, trying to help other sims, help other games, help other COs, kind of get their games cultivated, try and help them be successful and try and bring them good players as well. And so it's kind of the result of everything that's gone on. But I guess fundamentally, this has all happened, and now we need to, I guess in order to make any progress, right, we need to kind of understand the reasons behind why this happened. Because if we don't understand why this happened, if we don't critically think about the situation and what happened, if we don't evaluate it, that we can't make any progress and move forward, right?
You said that it was Task Force 47 that had the mass exodus.
That's correct, yes.
That, ironically, because I have been around when some of these exoduses have occurred, this I think is either the 3rd or 4th big one. So yeah, Obsidian Fleet will survive, but all of them have occurred in 47.
Cursed.
That's interesting.
Hey guys, I'm gonna make a quick head call. You guys keep talking. I'll be right back.
Well,
Yeah.
I think
Hello,
that
Head.
there has been some of the people. I don't know if they've raised this everywhere, but I think some of the people have had some understandable reasons for wanting to leave. Now, I think some others probably were just kind of hangers on, or there was a lot of
Yeah.
interpersonal BS going on there. But I think some of the things that people were frustrated over was, first off, I think people were frustrated that there were some proposals going around within Fleet Council that the CEOs didn't know about and they wanted to know about. But I think more importantly, I know at least one or two of the sims left because there was stuff that they wanted to do on their sim that they weren't allowed to do being in Obsidian Fleet. Things like changing their specifications around on their sim. They wanted to change the whole concept of their sim towards kind of a Federation rapid response force, and that's something that Obsidian Fleet has rules against for some reason. So I think there were some. Now, I don't agree with the way they went about raising their issues, but I think at core there were, if you're being generous, there were some legitimate issues there. And I think that, to be honest, I do think that Obsidian Fleet should kind of chill out about things like rules and specifications a little bit. Like, if I want to put a detachable roll bar on my Miranda class ship and have it do a saucer separation thing, you know, and the Admiralty says, no, you can't do that because the specs are here, that's going to cause some frustration.
Yeah.
And it's going to cause some unnecessary frustration because why the hell shouldn't I do that?
See, I got around that by going through R&D when I had my Nebby command. And, of course, the default for the fleet was the tactical pod, I think it was. But I wanted a hangar pod. So, and they didn't have any deck layouts or stuff to tell me what the pods looked like on the 4 decks. So I went and did it myself, and then I showed R&D, and they're like, yeah, you can do it. Never bothered me ever since.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, even having to go through, like, even if they don't say no, which, sometimes they may or may not, even having to go through a layer of bureaucracy to do things that you want to do on your own sim has got to be frustrating for a lot of COs. I mean, there's some stuff where I've kind of, I've kind of probably gone with the old easier to beg for forgiveness than ask for permission strategy on that.
Yeah.
But
who is
then
the
from-
RNG anyway?
From like a player's point of view, and I hear these things, it just seems like it's unnecessary, completely unnecessary. I would expect the fleet to be incredibly decentralized in the way that it operates, where you're just focused on being reasonable.
I know where they're saying no.
Yeah. So if someone is saying no about something, then you're going to want a why. I mean, just as a human being, you're going to want a why, and you're going to want a why that makes sense, that has some impact on things. So if you're telling someone no, there should be a good reason why no. No, you can't have that on your ship because if you did, then it would affect this, that, and the other. Not no, you can't have that on their ship because the specs here say you can't do that.
Mm.
yeah.
But it looks like they don't even have an R&D director at the moment, and I'm betting, the default answer for Triad is no until they get a fill-in or whatever.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, and this is something that I rant about every few months, because, every few months someone comes up with the genius idea of, I think the Miranda class is too old. We should just get rid of all the Miranda classes. And, it's just such a genius idea, to raise that thing, without actually talking to the one CO of a Miranda class vessel
Mhm.
in the fleet. So it's like, I get kind of frustrated whenever I see chat or people talking about, hey, let's get rid of Brian's ship and only Brian's ship because I think it's too old, which is a whole BS argument that I don't even want to get into there.
Wait. You have a Miranda and you're a TGCO?
Yeah.
That is effing awesome. You're one of the first people I've seen that has had an older class and has been able to work with it. I applaud you for that. Awesome.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's something that I specifically went for because, like, when I looked at the ship listings, I was originally came through Star Trek via like the original series and the original movies. So seeing something that was kind of present in there was cool, and it got me thinking. Flying around on an older ship poses some unique challenges, and it means that it means that you can get some good writing out of it. Facing those unique challenges and overcoming them.
Well, from a writing perspective, I hate where all you have to do is zoom to warp 9.9 and you're at your destination in 5 hours, 3 hours. So, I do like you have the slower destination time, which means you have, more character development stuff in between. It's fun.
Yeah. But I mean, kind of getting back to the fleet a little bit, I think they do offer some great resources, but I think there is that trade-off that you have to kind of follow their rules, and I think on a lot of things that trade-off isn't really totally necessary. Like, for example, having to set your sim in 2391. Well, there's a lot of other periods which are, quite frankly, probably more interesting than 2391 because they have canon stuff going on that people can relate to, like, say,
Dominion War.
Dominion War.
We're actually in 2392 now for the start of the new year. So you're even further behind.
My sim's in 2390.
Jay, you missed my Miranda rant, so...
Oh, no, well, that's why I stepped out, to be honest. I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
I went out, had a beer, a cigarette, just chilling. I was like, yeah, Brian's chatting about the Miranda.
See, the thing is I like COs who actually take the really hard classes that are either too old or the Defiant, which is so hard to work with, because it's really a patrol vessel. It's not really made for long-term explorations or anything. But it's like when I was a TGCO, I went for the classes that people could actually work with, especially for new COs. So I'd always tell my task force CO, look, put a Galaxy, a Nebula, an Excalibur, or put those in, and that worked for me. It did. I cheated. It is cheating. But I had the best turnover as a TGCO than anybody else in the fleet. Yeah, I think it took me 6 months before I actually had to get rid of somebody because of inactivity, but for me, I played it safe. And of course, if there's somebody who actually wants a Defiant or what was the Griffin? No, the Centaur class, or some of the others, yeah, go for it. But it's really hard to find people who can actually, take the limited, harder to roleplay ships and run with it like you have. So yeah, that's awesome.
I think from my perspective, all of this is just kind of like, if there's administration and if there's oversight, it seems like it's kind of geared towards stifling people's creativity as opposed to encouraging or embracing it. So if someone has an idea and it's not totally crazy, and I think everyone has kind of a baseline common sense that they can use with that, as long as it's not totally crazy, then encourage them to run with it, because that's what makes a healthy organization, is when people feel free to express themselves, they get excited about it, they get invested in it, and it's not having to follow X, Y, and Z formula.
Let's face it, the Academy is XYZ formula. In my opinion, it's crap.
It all sounds like micromanaging to me.
It is.
But like for me as a player, I prefer, when I choose a sim, I like the older vessels or smaller vessel. I think there's a lot more to work with. Player-wise, character development-wise, when it is a smaller vessel or an older vessel, like some of these that I see on OF and all that, they have those big, they're like Elysium class or something. Are they from SDO? those are like huge, and I would look at the
Oh,
specs,
yeah.
and I'm like, I don't even understand this.
I'm already gonna say, somebody
Oh boy.
for somebody who has a really a understanding of specs and deck layouts and who can actually read the metric system, Obsidian Fleet is severely underrated as far as what a lot of these ships are, deck-wise, weapons-wise, how big the shuttle bays are. Yeah. But I think the reason why they keep telling no to people who, are like, well, can I have an extra Hunley? And it used to be that the R&D director, if you wanted a different kind of shuttle that wasn't part of your whatever the standard is that they give on the specs, you had to make a good argument for it. Like, I wanted to get rid of a bunch of my hoppers, my Wyvern hoppers, so that I can get, a couple more Delta Flyers. And they were like, fine, that's okay. Well, I had a hangar pod, so they really didn't have much of an argument for it because, yeah. But I think.
But I mean, just the work you had to go through though to get that hangar pod. Yeah. And I mean, granted, you. Oh,
it wouldn't work at all.
To you, it's you like to do that stuff. That it sounds like, but I mean, if you wanted it, it shouldn't have been a whole process,
No.
to get it. You should have been like, well, this is why I would like it. You shouldn't have had to draw out specs and all that just to get a hangar pod.
It wasn't specs. It really wasn't specs because they had everything out. It was just I had to change up the layout in the subpods, and when I showed them, like deck 1 was the CAG's office and the simulator rooms, and deck 2 and 3 was the double stacked system that I would stack the Valkyries on so that I can get more fighters in there. So essentially it was a heavy fleet carrier because we had somewhere around close to 90 birds in the hangar pod itself. Wow. Because of the double stacking system. It was awesome. And yeah, so they let me have it, and it was the fleet's fighter carrier, which was awesome.
Well, I think if you want to have a pod, and you say I want to have a pod, and they're like no, I mean, as long as you have a reason for your story to have it, it's not like I want a pod so I can detach it and throw it at Cardassia Prime or whatever. You want a pod for
well, what if you do want to throw it at Cardassia Prime?
Well, the thing is like a lot of, and I'm not meaning to play devil's advocate, but a lot of people just go to R&D and be like, hey, I want a Hunley, can I use it? And they're looking at this request going, why? Because it's a very broad, and they have to look up your ship specs, and so I knew ahead of time what I was going to have to go through the red tape. So I had it all mapped out on what I wanted in my deck, how I wanted my fighter system and launching system to go in the hangar pod, and I had all that written down, and they approved it, just because I made it hard for them not to argue, and not to deny.
The funny thing for me is I'm like the exact opposite as a CO. Like, I don't understand specs, and I don't particularly care to understand specs.
Yeah.
All I really care about is, like, who cares if I have a Mark 7 or a Mark 8 phaser array? I'm just like, can that Cardassian ship kick my ass? Okay, probably. That's the takeaway from that. I don't really care to go into too much technical stuff. I'm just more concerned with the narrative implications of it.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like if the story demands something, then do it, if it'll make the story better.
I think nowadays, though, a lot of the different kinds of torpedoes that people are carrying on board, they really should just scrap it and give everybody heavy quantum torpedoes, because those suckers... yeah, they're going to do a lot more damage than like the photon torpedo and some of the others.
I just need to make sure where things are. So I'm with you, Brian. I don't really need to know about specs or anything, but a deck listing is helpful, especially when
the deck listings are fun.
I think one of the beauties of being on Galileo is that it's a very intricate ship, just like any starship is. We've got a lot of different elements, different components to it. It's kind of a engineering marvel in and of itself. You got to think this ship is 180 meters long. To put that in reference for you guys, 180 meters is the size of a tall skyscraper or of a large yacht. So this is really a small ship.
Right.
It's probably one of the smallest that you'll ever encounter. And a lot of times when we're simming on board, we don't realize how small the ship is. You know what I'm saying?
She's not built for war at all.
It's, 180 meters is absolutely tiny. In terms of a starship, I mean, we're talking about as small as it gets. Like, this ship is half the size of a Galaxy-class nacelle.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're about as small as it gets on the spectrum. The only thing that's smaller than us is a Defiant, and that's only by maybe 20 meters or so. So we're pretty much on that same scale. But
we certainly don't ride it like a small ship. That's what's so funny.
Yeah, what's that?
We don't ride it like a small ship.
Oh no, I mean we use all 7 decks. We have the bar. It's like people just like doing everything like all the time on board the ship. It's like nobody else knows what everybody else is doing. When in real life there'd be like 1,000 people witnessing like a hookup, like,
right?
You know, at any given time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So,
Well, if I remember correctly, Intrepids and Novas, they weren't built for long-term service, so those walls are thin. If somebody's getting it on, I guarantee you the next-door neighbor knows exactly how and when it got on.
well, that's why Lyra's quarters are soundproofed, because she's in the VIP quarters.
But they even did that on Voyager. There was an episode where Harry Kim mentioned
He was trying to play his clarinet. Yeah,
right, and how the bioneural circuitry kind of carries it. So there's my nerd moment.
There's all kinds of things carried all over this ship.
Yeah, but I guess, man, where was I even going with that? I guess so.
So does that mean we can hear Mott eating all the time?
Yes, you can hear him eating in his quarters through the circuitry on the deck above.
Yeah.
Just like the warp core, except you can hear it everywhere. You know that.
Oh my god, I don't even know what I was going to talk about. I had this whole thing lined up in my head. I'm just blanking.
Matt's trying to hide in the Jeffrey's tube and eat the sandwich, and it's echoing all over the ship. We know what you're eating.
I think I just wanted to say in terms of the design and the specs and things like that, I'm with Brian too. I don't know anything about anything. Like even Jay's description just now of the ship was a little mind-blowing for me. I don't know what I've been thinking. I probably think it's just this massive like sovereign class ship flying through the space or whatever. But I think we should definitely give our thanks to the command staff for making resources available, for doing the hard work for us, so that we can just go and look at the deck listing, or we can, because there are like pictures and things there. That helps me a lot. The deck listing is fine, but being able to see things helps me visualize it. It helps me in terms of writing. So I think there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that goes into the specs and things like that that allows me to say I don't care about the specs because Jay's doing it for me.
Right. Well, the Galileo site is really extensive, and it's not. I haven't seen anything else like it out there. All the information is so readily available to us, and that's extremely helpful.
Oh, thanks, guys. I appreciate that. That's kind of the reason I did it all, was to make, I guess what's the word? Streamline it and make everything more, like you were saying, Matthew, make everything more accessible to everybody, so that it's easy to find the content that you want to find, and it's also, I guess in that process, it also helps you get a better picture of our ship and kind of what we're about, because we do run a specialty game. We're not just like any other game out there, and one of the points of our specialty is, not only do we do planetary science, of which we're the only Star Trek simulation on the internet that does planetary science as a specialty. I think we are the only Nova class on the internet, right? I mean, have you guys seen another Nova class anywhere on the internet? So yeah, we've got both of those niches that we're running with, and it's definitely unique. And and with anything unique, it's kind of like we have to understand what makes it unique in order to play it successfully and to play it to the hilt.
Well,
You know,
it starts at the top because I
Yeah.
mean, you knew you were running a specialty sim, so you have, as a CO, you have to know what kind of missions that's going to entail as a science ship. So I commend you on that, definitely.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've always had a vision for our game. You know, I've always felt that we could do things that other Trek things couldn't. I've always felt that we could do things that took us to the heart of Star Trek and to the core themes of Star Trek that other ships and other CEOs couldn't. And
Are you cold?
it's it's something that, you know, I've tried my best to do. I don't know if we've been successful. I kind of gauged on how much fun everybody's having for each mission. You know, I know not every mission that we do is planetary science, but that's our general theme. I mean, even running back to the whole thing about like ship specifications and all that stuff. I mean, I've had to edit the Nova class stuff. I mean, if you look at the stock Nova class stuff for Obsidian Fleet, they don't have us having an aft torpedo launcher, and there's no Starfleet ship in service that doesn't have an aft torpedo launcher. So that's something I just added. You know, and let's just not talk about that so I don't get in trouble.
Okay, so
Yeah, so I did it and I added it, and so we have an aft torpedo launcher now. And
do you actually want to know a secret about that?
What?
Your task force CO or whoever, when you're going through Command Academy, doesn't give a shit after they do the initial inspection of, oh, they got their specs, blah, blah, blah. They're not going to check that again.
Oh yeah, totally. Just think of how much stuff I snuck by my TGCO.
Now, the only way you're going to get caught,
right?
the only way you're lucky to get caught is if somebody who happens to be brass or in the R&D department who joins your ship, looking through this and going, wait a minute, that ship doesn't need a Hunley.
or listens to this podcast.
And I actually put a yeah, seriously, right? But no, I actually put in a request. We actually changed around our auxiliary support craft, like our shuttlecraft and all that stuff. We did that about a year ago, and we got a much better set than what we had originally been given. And that process was pretty easy. There's nothing wrong with it. I just said, hey, like I want this, and this. I want to get rid of this, and then it was done. So I can't really blame, I can't fault anybody for that process. I thought it was pretty streamlined. It was kind of annoying to just have to ask for it, but I understand we're part of a bigger fleet and they want to have some semblance of quality control. So, it is what it is. I don't mind it. It was done. We've all kind of benefited from it. But I think you guys touched on a larger issue, which is that there's certain things, if you want to do with your sim, if you want to try and make your ship unique, that Obsidian Fleet will just not allow. They just won't allow certain things. And that's kind of the heart of, I think, what this discussion was all about, is that it's kind of like, we're part of a larger organization. There's a certain sacrifice you have to make, and there's a certain benefit that you get for being a part of Obsidian Fleet. The benefit is that as a CEO, your sim gets exposure. You get 10, 20, 30, close to 100 times more website hits on your sim being a part of Obsidian Fleet than you do being an independent sim.
Yeah.
If you're part of another organization like Bravo Fleet or Theta Fleet or I don't know what else is out there, Pegasus Fleet, you're probably getting a third of that in terms of the website. So Obsidian Fleet offers you, if you join Obsidian Fleet, they offer you the exposure. And that exposure, in turn, results in recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that the basis and the foundation of any sim is the player base. So recruiting is a huge factor. It's probably honestly, it's probably one of the most important factors for people who want to start up a new sim, is to try it, because they're all trying to find a good player base, trying to get good players on their game, and it's no easy task. I mean, it's not something that just comes overnight. We get bunches of player applications on Galileo. I mean, I'd say our rejection rate's close to 20-30%. So we screen a lot of our players. We just don't accept everybody who comes along. We look for quality writers, and we're able to do that because we get such a high volume of applications and we get such a high volume of applications because we're a part of Obsidian Fleet, which in turn gives us more internet exposure. Does that make sense? So that's the one thing that being a part of Obsidian Fleet offers. But on the other hand, kind of like the other Brian, what he was saying, they do ask a lot of you. You know, they ask you to make sacrifices. They ask you to follow a certain canon. They ask you to follow a certain timeline. They kind of restrict what you can do and cannot do with your sim. They tell you what type of species you can and can't have on your sim. You know, it's a trade-off, and it's a balancing act, man. I don't really know how to describe it. It's one of those things where I think in theory it works out well, but in practice, it's complete anarchy, you know? Because you have some sims who don't really get anything. They don't really benefit anything from being part of a Obsidian Fleet. Like, they're not recruiting properly, they're not doing what they need to do to recruit, and they don't see that they're getting the benefits from it. And so then they just become disgruntled because from their perspective, it seems like they're being told what to do, and they're losing. You know, they're in a losing battle. You know, it seems like they're making all these sacrifices without getting any benefits.
But the thing is I don't necessarily think it's also a recruiting boon. The sims that struggle. A lot of it has to deal with the CO. If you're not very personable or reachable,
it's the CO. It absolutely is.
Right.
If you can't build a community, they're not going to want to invest. If the community is...
And the most frustrating thing, I'm sorry to interrupt, Lauren. The most frustrating thing is to see in this past Exodus, I saw a bunch of Sims who were leaving, people who said negative things about Obsidian Fleet, and they wanted to leave. But they themselves weren't putting in the effort to make their Sim successful.
No.
You know, those people themselves, they weren't putting in 100%. They weren't devoting their time to their crew to make their sim successful. And instead of taking the blame for the way that their sim was, the status of their sim, they blamed it on Obsidian Fleet instead of themselves. So they put the problems that they were having with their crew, their lack of activity, lack of writing with their own crew, and they blamed it on Obsidian Fleet instead of themselves. And that's something I don't agree with. You know, that's something that really made me upset.
A lot of people assume that once you graduate the Command Academy with OF, that you are able and know what you're doing. That's not exactly true. At the height of my sim, when I had it in Obsidian Fleet, I had 45 people. It's madness, but it was popular. I didn't get that popular just because I was recruiting on the boards and all this stuff. I actually took the time to
picture it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Now, as a CO, you have to get to know the people. You have to create a fun atmosphere. People are not going to join your sim just because you're recruiting on OF's board every day and saying that's, you know, people will join, but they'll leave really quickly when they realize it's not really the community for them, or, you know. And I think the Academy needs to address at least how to build a proper, fun community, although that is a really hard concept to do.
It is. I mean, that's a document. I mean, that's not just one document. That's probably a 5-part document, each of which is like 10,000 words.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's something that even if you write it out, some people just won't understand the concept.
It's really hard to teach people how to build a community, right?
Yeah,
you
exactly.
kind of either know or you don't know.
Yeah, so some people I think have that gene, and some people don't. And for those people that don't, you can put it in writing all you want, but it's not really going to help them. You know, it was like, for example, I tell people, you know, people come to me. They've come to me before when I was working in as a TGCO. They say, hey, you know, I'm having trouble with recruiting. So I've laid out a 4-step program for them. I said, okay, put advertisements on these 3 sites. Create a banner, and put it on the Obsidian Fleet Banner Exchange.
Yeah.
I was like, put up a news item for Obsidian Fleet on the main page. And I was like, and then write with your players.
But see, teaching exposure.
But I told them, hold on. Yeah. I told them, if you do these 4 things, I was like, all you have to do these 4 things, and keep it up for 2 months, and your sim will be successful, and you'll have an influx of players. And these COs, they just wouldn't do it. I don't know if they didn't. I don't know why they didn't do it. I don't know if they thought it was too much work, but they just didn't do it. And in that case, I can't help them. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't help a person who's not willing to put in the time and the effort to make a sim successful. Because that's what I did when I started Galileo. Like I didn't start the sim with any friends. Like I knew nobody in Obsidian Fleet when I started Galileo. I started with myself and I think Matt. Matt plays Quinn. He's our chief of the boat. He was my first player, and he joined about a week after I started the sim. So I went a week without any applications when I first started, and it was really tough. It was really disheartening. You know, I just had the sim, I was just waiting. I mean, can you imagine just an empty sim, and you're just working on it, you're just waiting for people to come. And after a week, I finally got my first player, and I was so excited. And so I just started writing with him, and then a week after that, Tom joined, and our CMO joined, and I got another player. And at the end of our first month, we had 6 players. So that's 1 month, 6 players. That's not exactly a great pace. You know, it's not like we like burst out of the gate. You know, but every person who joined, I vetted them, I talked to them, and I just wrote with them as much as I could, and I tried to make them my friend, and I tried to kind of build that community that we had, and it was a slow process. And 6 months later, come to find out, even before we got our 18 plus rating, we had 19 players on the game. It is a little tiny Nova class, and so if I can do it, anybody can do it. It's not hard. It's not rocket science. You know, it's not like we're doing anything amazing. Anybody could do it. And that's what the thing that I try to teach and try to explain to all the other CEOs that we have, especially the ones that are underneath me. You know, it's something that everybody could do. And you just got to put the time and the effort into it. You know, you got to weather the bad times and just keep pushing on and not get discouraged and just keep pushing into it.
Yeah.
So can you send me that list of 4 things?
Oh, you want my recruiting guide? I don't know, Brian. I think that's going to cost you 10 JPs.
Well, okay.
That's cold.
All right, five JPs.
All right. No, I think you got a good point there in that like COs and command staff need to put the time in. I mean, you know, I've seen in my simming career like the difference that like an active and engaged CO and XO can make. Like I feel like if you're a CO or an XO, your first job should be to make sure everyone has a tag at all times.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know, if you don't do that, then you know you wonder why you know, like it seems like a lot of people are like, God, guys, why aren't you posting? You know, you should be posting more. You know, there's the 2-week rule, and it's like, well, have you done anything to motivate them? You know?
Yeah, there's a sim right now in in OF that I'm on with my medical officer. I won't name the sim. I
It's
joined
those
it.
fuckers on the Portland, isn't it?
Yeah, I hate them. They're like jackasses.
Yeah, here, some sort of like sex hologram over there or something, right?
That's what I heard.
But it's like I've been trying to find a spot for my CMO character forever and a day, and I finally transferred her to the one ship, and you know the CO is nice out of character. It's just she's not really involving me in any of the plot, and then she's like trying to bug me about trying to post. Well, if you've got me in a hole and I'm not involved until after everybody gets hurt and everybody's off the ship except for me.
Yeah. That happened to me as well. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. It's just some of these COs, I don't know if they are actually paying attention. It's like if you leave somebody stagnant out of the story for too long, they're going to be disheartened or disenchanted. And yeah, it's like it's very hard to find a good CO in this fleet, in my opinion. Very hard.
But that happened to me too. I kept getting warnings, and you know how active I am on the Galileo. So
yeah,
for me to get a warning for not posting
when it's not your fault.
Right. There was nothing for me to do, and it was one of those cases where my science officer, I kept I kept having to transfer him because the sim that
Mhm.
I was on kept failing. And then I found the one, and then the CO is, super nice, but I kept getting warnings. And I'm like, well, I'm done. I can't think of anything to do if I'm not given anything to do, and obviously I'm an active simmer.
Yeah.
And it kind of was like a slap to the face that I had never gotten a warning on any sim in my life, and then all of a sudden I'm getting one. It's like,
Yeah.
I felt like I
Hold
was
on.
in ninth grade again.
Let me write you a warning right now. I think you
Yeah.
got like 2 weeks without a JP.
Well, on that subject, though, I think another important thing is a lot of times players are reluctant to post because they feel like if they do something, they're going to ruin the CO's story. And that's something that I've really, really, really tried to get away from. Like with
Right.
every new player who comes aboard and is like, can I do this? I'm afraid that if I, will it ruin the story? And I'm just like, no. The only way you can ruin the story is by making it boring.
That's
Honestly,
that's a great point,
But that's
Brian.
not.
Because that's something a lot of our players here on Galileo have said before.
I'm
Because
one of them.
we run a certain type of style, and we're actually going to go into one of our more heavily scripted missions coming up, which is something I don't think any of you guys have had experience with because we haven't done it in a couple of years. But it's when it works. I guess let me backtrack. When we do it, it usually works. It usually works very well. It is really exciting, but it also has like a strict. I mean, it's scripted. There's a certain series of events which need to happen in turn
Yeah.
in order for our mission to progress.
Yeah.
And within those certain events, there's obviously opportunity for different characters to do different things, to interact with the environment around them, and kind of do the things that they want to do. But I've always gotten that kind of, I don't know if it's a complaint or just just kind of like feedback, where some players who are new to Sim who really haven't acclimated yet have just said, hey, I don't really know what's going on. I feel like a little bit overwhelmed. I'm not sure like what I should be posting. And I mean, I completely understand. I mean, can you imagine joining a sim like Galileo and suddenly you're just imagine joining like halfway through a mission, you're just thrust in the middle of it. Yeah. And it's like a mass JP, and you don't know any of the characters, and you're just like, like what? You're like, just what the hell do I do?
I think it matters a lot when you join. Like, at what point are you joining in on things? Because when I came in, it was at the end of mission 5, I want to say, and I had no idea what the hell was going on. So I just said, I'm not gonna. I have plenty I want to say about my character, so I'm on Earth, and here's what I want to write about. Until it got to a point where I could jump in, but I could see where people would join and just be totally overwhelmed and not know an entry point and then just give up.
Was episode 5? Was that Solstice? Was that our last shore leave?
Was the one with the Borg? Maybe it was 4. I don't know.
What was it called? There was. Hold on, sorry. Let me look. I can't believe I don't remember. I'm a bad CEO.
Bad.
There was some Borg ship caught somewhere, and these aliens were using
it. Yeah. Okay. Exodus. You came in.
Yeah, Exodus.
Oh, man, I couldn't believe it. That's how sorry. The Exodus, I think, was our greatest mission ever. That was amazing. Yeah, and the one before that was Frontier, which it was a 2-parter. Frontier led into Exodus. And then we had the shore leave after. Wow, you've been on board that long, Brian? I
have. I've just been, hanging out. Don't make a fuss. Don't make a fuss. Nobody notices.
Just being bowling.
Just being bowling, you know how it is.
Yeah, now see, I came in at the end of Solstice, and I just kind of had my character come in because, he was new to Starship life anyway, so that worked in my favor. So,
Yeah, I think a lot of how you acclimate yourself or how you're acclimated to the ship is almost 100% dependent on when you come in, which I've kind of enjoyed because I've noticed, at least recently, we've had people come in at, I would say, quote unquote, appropriate times, where they don't just pop up on the ship like, "Hey guys, I've been here the whole time. How's it going? You don't remember me?" Which is
That was fun.
Hello,
so
mic check,
you broke the thing.
mic check, mic check.
He pushed the thing and broke it. Yeah.
All right, so you guys can all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you.
All right. Well, I think I think we're good for the podcast, right? We've kind of covered as much stuff as we can. Obviously, it's a pretty complex issue, and I mean, we could break it down and dissect it into multiple parts over like hours and hours. But I think for now, you guys have all done a great job.
It's your job to shut us down.
It is my job. So we're gonna do that right now. I'm gonna push the thing.
Gotta push the thing.
That's right. I'm gonna push the thing. Thank you guys all very much. My name is Jay. Signing off for the USS Galileo. I'm here with Brian, Mark, Brian, and Matthew. And we will see you guys next time. Adios.